Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of Living with Dementia. As people will know, we have spent most of this year looking at different aspects of this disease, and previously we have talked to medical professionals and legal professionals. And today we're going to get a lot more personal. And I'd like to introduce these three ladies that are going to spend the next 45 minutes with us. And it's their view and their perspective of what it is to live with and to experience dementia personally. So I'll just open the floor, and perhaps Carmel, you'd like to start.
Hi everybody, thank you Peter. My name's Carmel Gagan and I live in the west of Ireland, and I suppose in 2010 my life changed dramatically from living a very stress-free probably life to caring for my dad first to end of life, because he got a very late diagnosis for cancer, and then my mom came to live with me, who we eventually got diagnosed with mixed dementia. And I had mom till end of life. And then I continued to advocate because of her human rights being violated. And I set up Dementia Ireland, empowering communities. So obviously from there, I've met the amazing Helen Rochford-Brennan, who you'll hear from now, and also Dr. Irene Hartigan. So it's this is part of my journey along the way.
Carmel, thank you very much indeed. Helen, good morning to you.
Good morning. My story is that in 2012, I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. I spent 5 years trying to get a proper diagnosis, and when I did, it was shock and sadness, and my life was over. It had come to an end, and that was my life as I was. And now I had a new life with Alzheimer's, and I call that my Alzheimer's life. It was not easy for my family. There were no supports. There was no care. There was nobody there to help me and guide me. And I was home with my husband, wondering where all this was going to go. So all the plans had been thrown away. All the plans we had for the future, because we didn't realize that you could live with this illness. And then, as somebody that was very involved in rights many years ago, it just came into my own head, and I spent 9 years working for the rights of people with physical and sensory disability prior to my own diagnosis. And it just came into my head then that I just need to do something about what's wrong. I have no rights. I have nobody to help me, and where would I go? So just by chance, Professor Ian Robinson in Trinity College had made an announcement on the radio for people with Alzheimer's to get involved in some research. And that was how I suppose my journey into life began, because that's when I really got help. I became involved through Trinity with the Alzheimer Society, who was just starting up the Irish Dementia Working Group. And from then on, it was about fighting for my voice, my rights, and my choices, what I want to do, and where I want to go, and how I can do that for others, not just for myself. So my life today is filled with going forward with joy and with happiness every day, not with doom and gloom.
That's lovely to hear, Helen. Thank you. And Irene, I'll just pass to you the mic to you.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you, Carmel and Helen, for that introduction. My name's Irene Hartigan. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Nursing and Midwifery in University College Cork, and I'm delighted to be here to talk about palliative care approaches for people with dementia. I'm particularly delighted to have had a number of years of now working with Carmel and Helen, who both keep the conversation very, very real. Within the ivory tower institutions of what academia is often known as, I'm glad to say that, through efforts like public and patient engagement or involvement PPI that we have the likes of Helen and Carmel that really can help us shape research and education. So it's really an honor to have their stories and their insights into how we can move forward to really look at end-of-life conversations, and particularly with some of the research that I'm currently involved in, and also within our educational units for other researchers and future clinicians.
That's great. Thanks very much, Irene. And we'll definitely come back to that as we go through this session. But perhaps, and I think both Carmel and Helen touched on this, could I ask how your diagnosis changed the way you think about your future and your autonomy?
Well, for me, can I just say, for my diagnosis, I've said from the very beginning, I have made my plans what I want in life. Okay, so how I live and how I die is my choice, and it's my right to make those decisions. So luckily enough, we can plan ahead. So we plan ahead. I planned ahead, and my plan was to make sure that my son knows that I am not to be kept alive if I become very ill. No jumping up and down on me to keep me going. I want to be left to die with palliative care and dignity, and that's what I really want. And it did change my mind. I would have thought from the beginning that if I was ill, I would never. I would want treatment, as much treatment, and having a family, it even makes you really think about this, because it was a very hard conversation with the family, Peter. It was a very hard conversation with my son to say this to him, because he wants his mother to be around forever. And so when you have that conversation, and I want to make that clear, having the conversation with your family is not easy. But we got through it, and that is my choice. And that is my choice that is written as to what I want.
That's great, Helen. Thank you. And Carmel, what about yourself?
Yeah, probably when Mom, Dad, it all happened so quickly that I had never thought about my end of life or my what was going to happen to me, because I was too busy living in the moment. So certainly that started all of those conversations within my own head and with my friends. And I would now, I want to have choice. And particularly, I suppose that's why I've come, like my mom was denied palliative care because she didn't have cancer. And that was you could call it ignorance within the medical team, the local medical team that were working with us. Because I had gone back to college, caring for Mom, to have a stronger voice for her. So I went back and I did a diploma in social gerontology in the university in Galway. So of course, knowledge is power. So I learned so much, so I could ask those difficult questions and demand for Mom. And then probably after she passed away, I just thought, rather than fighting the system that had failed her and violated her rights, I decided to tell her story. And that's really how it started. Originally, it was only to talk to, retired groups and community groups. And then you just saw the void that was there. Nobody was talking about it. And it was a taboo subject. And especially, I grew up in a time where we looked after our grandparents. My parents looked after their parents. But then my generation really had started to put them into care homes. So that cycle of care had been broken. And I suppose when you don't have children as well, you have to look at who I am responsible from my own care and my own plans end of life. So that's probably how I came along on this track. And I suppose I had discussed it with my sister prior to that, because neither of us wanted to go into a care home at any stage. So it's constant now, and as you're not getting younger, so you know death is inevitable. So I have to make my own plans.
Mm-hmm. Irene, could I maybe ask you from a sort of like a professional's perspective, is loss of autonomy absolutely the main fear that drives people with dementia, or are there other aspects to the disease that are equally important?
Yeah, I think it's complicated because there's no two people are going to have the same journey as they move through dementia. And I suppose we can't forget as well how emotional these conversations are. And like, I really respect, Helen and Carmel for being able to talk about being a carer and also being a person with dementia. And I know I suppose, Helen, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I have witnessed a lot of ways that you can help buffer some of the cognitive challenges that you are faced with on a day-to-day perspective that help you retain that autonomy and dignity. And for healthcare professionals, when they have often a fleeting encounter with the person with dementia or their carer, they don't have that established relationship with the person. So it's very hard for them in the moment to be able to actually assess and inform their decisions. So I think that we are moving forward, but it is slow, and we are trying to, and when I say we, like, there's a number of organizations across the globe and across Europe and across Ireland that are really trying to push conversations around, well, how do we do assessments, for people and their families to truly reflect their own unique experience and to be able to put in some pathways that can support the person to live independently. And as Carmel said, there was a tradition, of looking after elders in the home. And unfortunately, that isn't recognized as much nowadays. It's not valuable, in today's life. And until we see some of the work that's been done currently by Families Carers Ireland to remove the means testing for carers allowance, well, then maybe that'll help put some value back on, okay, having the person at home and caring for them because that's what their wishes are, that they always wanted to live and die at home, surrounded by family and supported. So I think that, there is changes happening, and it is thanks to like the organizations like the All Ireland Institute of Hospice and Palliative Care, the Irish Hospice Foundation, Dementia Ireland, the Alzheimer Society of Ireland. And these organizations are good to help understand, well, what is, the unique journey of this person? Because in nursing education, we've looked at person-centered care for a long time, but integrating that into day-to-day practices, it's really difficult to achieve. And I think that there is a unique journey here with a palliative care approach. So like as Helen and Carmel have said there, they don't want to suffer, they don't want to be in pain, and they would like, their choices respected. So I think that the autonomy, can be buffered a little bit by day-to-day practices and having that unique relationship with the person as they move through their journey and their diagnosis.
No, that's really interesting. And actually, I just want to go back, Helen, I heard an interview that you gave recently. And I think for you, one of the key things is to be able to stay in your own home for as long as possible, or indeed for like your whole journey through dementia. How important do you think it is for people with dementia to stay in a place that they know and obviously are comfortable with?
I think it's very important for us to be able to stay in our own homes for as long as we possibly can. This is where we belong, no matter what illness, no matter what our diagnosis. And I just want to say, first, before I fully answer that question, that a lot of the times, and Irene just touched on it there, it's an emotional thing for us, you know, to have the right to make our own decisions and to make decisions about our future, because we're not always included in the conversations. When these conversations start about life and about how we live our life and how we end our life, of course we weren't at the table, but we're at the table now and our voices are being heard. And that's what's important. When you're looking at law and policy in particular, it's important that we're at that table and that our voices are heard. So I don't want any assumptions I've made about me. I want my voice heard. And sometimes people think we find it's pressuring, or people with dementia and their families may think it's pressure. It's not pressure, honestly. And that leads me to the pressure of wanting to stay at home. I want to be in the community that I live in and love and cherish, and the families that are here and the people that I've known and care for, and they care for me, I care for them. And I think that gives us a real sense of purpose and a real sense of hope. Hope that the end isn't going to be that bad, that we can continue to live. Many of us continue to live, most all, I hope, with love from the people around us. And it's important that when decisions are made, that a decision should be made to support us to live at home. And the supports, unfortunately, here in Ireland are not available for people to stay in their own homes, in particular people with dementia. And from that point of view, yes, we're all different. You know, we say you see two people with dementia, you see two people. We're very different. We have very different types of side effects for illnesses. There's ways many of us are cover up, as I used to say years ago, we're cover-uppers. So we want to stay here. We want to stay in our communities. I have my garden, I have my dog, I have my family, you know, my nieces and nephews live close by, and some sisters and brothers. So it's important that I have that family, but also my family is greater than just the family I have, because it's the community. It's the joy of living in a community that's inclusive and respects everybody. And that's why I want to stay here for as long as I can, to be with the things that I'm familiar with. Every day I lose something, every day I have anxiety. There is never a day I don't have anxiety about something, because that's part and parcel of my illness. But I know that when I put on my coat and put the dog on his lead and walk out the door, that anxiety will leave me, that I can go for a nice walk. I can go for a drive in the countryside because I can still drive. And those things are so important, and they're so important in the choices we make. But the choices about living and the choices about dying, I think that is what has really supported me and helped me to make those choices. And my husband passed away in lockdown, Sean, and he had palliative care in the end. Did my son find it a struggle? Did I find it a struggle? It went on and it went on, and yes, we did. But, you know, he died with dignity. He died with respect. He died with the most absolutely amazing nurses around him. And that is, you know, what we should continue to look at, is how our choices about how we exit this world. I'm not sure if he was alive today that he would have said to me, hell, I didn't want that 2 weeks, Helen. So
yeah. Thanks, Helen. No, that's really interesting, and I think I would agree with you that actually being able to stay in the surroundings that you know and you're familiar with has to be helpful. You know, being transferred into an institution, no matter how well-meaning or well set up, it isn't your home. You know, at you know, at the end of that. But I don't know, Carmel, what would be your view on that?
Yeah, that is an issue. Families are afraid, I think, to deal with dying at home, and actually care homes in particular as well. Once the person seems to come to end of life, the ambulance is called and they're sent to the hospital. But I was lucky with Dad that he was in hospital and a wonderful nurse said to me to bring him home. He needs to go home to die. And that was the first time that anyone mentioned death. He was in there a good few weeks, but it was very late cancer stage. And while which is their job, the consultants were telling us that they would operate on him, and it's also a teaching hospital. So I understand as well that they have to learn and research, but there's, I suppose, yeah, it's the consideration of the family and bringing Dad home that time. While it was a shock that he got sick so quickly, that gave us time to come to terms with it, and it gave us time to get his friends to come and say goodbye, which he knew he was doing. And he died on a Tuesday, and he was screaming, literally screaming to die on the Saturday. Why couldn't he just go? So things like that, I just thought I grew up on a farm, and so I'd be quite black and white around death and pain, and like we wouldn't have put an animal, one of the horses or a dog or anything, through what my dad went through. They would have been put to sleep in a humane way with all of us there. So I found that absolutely shocking. And then that Dad passed, and then Mom stayed with me for 3 years. And her last year, I knew it was particularly bad because if you touched her, she was cringing and that. So I did ask her GP for morphine patches, which he prescribed, and then Mom was non-verbal. But that didn't mean anything because I keep telling people words are only 7% of communication, which people are quite shocked at. So we just have to give people time, and they can communicate body language, facial expressions. But again, like the night Mom died, the doctor on call, I just called him because my mom had to be made a ward of court, which was because people wouldn't listen to her once her diagnosis became public, and that included her GP. He wanted, the GP that came, he was on call, and he wanted to send her into the hospital. And I said, no, I said, my mom is dying, and her wish and my wish is she dies here at home with me. And as soon as he went, within 5 minutes, Mom passed away. So, and it's telling those stories to people and seeing, like as a child, I would have seen death. My family would have all my elders would have died at home. Nobody was gone into a hospital, or wouldn't have had the doctor even. So yeah, it was just, and I suppose that was my main thinking was, I don't want to end up like Mom or Dad here, screaming for the end and wanting to go. They were both really independent, hardworking people, and I think they had a right to choose the moment. And that meant Mom as well, who had a mixed dementia diagnosis. She knew exactly when she wanted to go. So I suppose that's where all my thinking has come from. And as anyone, it's life experience. And I'd also say that we weren't practicing Catholics, even though we were brought up. But I did, from the course, I had learned about the importance of spirituality at the end. And Mom died on a Sunday evening. I did go down, and the priest came to visit her on the Friday, and he was with her for 3 hours. So I don't know what they were talking about, but that obviously gave her peace of mind as well and put her to rest. And he left saying there was nothing imminent, as did the GP on the Sunday night. And she passed away in 5 minutes. So I really think that was her choice. And I know some people think I'm probably losing it, but I definitely believe they could decide when they were going. So
I think I could agree with you on that one for sure, Carmel. But I wonder, maybe we talk a little bit about the research around palliative care, because like death is so sanitized now. Like as you said, Carmel, previously people died at home, and and that was just the way life was. And now almost the expectation is you go to hospital or you go to palliative care. Do you think that we've kind of over medicalized death? There's just too much palliative care, or palliation is kind of seen as is absolutely necessary for most people, or I don't know. I have my own views on it, so I'll probably not say anything more on that.
I think if you have cancer, I'll let Irene speak to that. But if you have, like Dad, we had the hospice came, and at the time it was a really bad winter, 2010. So the army used to bring them. I had Dad 12 days and nights here, and then they had to leave us the morphine, so we administered it ourselves, and that was just unbelievable. I didn't think that would happen. And then the other thing, because Mom didn't have cancer, so that is changing. The GP didn't think she was entitled to palliative care. So thanks to researchers like Irene and that, and she'll tell you the work that's been done there. And I was involved in the All Ireland Institute when it was set up in 2012, I think it originally 2013. So I go back to the researcher.
Thanks, Carmel. And I suppose just to come in there at that point, Peter, like, we're only over a decade really, you know, of understanding palliation, and it is very different in the context of dementia. Like, the terminal nature of dementia is not really well understood, you know, even by healthcare professionals as well. So what we are trying to advocate is for a palliative care approach at the end of life for people with dementia. And then what that looks like can be quite different. You know, I suppose in the middle to early stage versus the middle to the end stage. And I suppose in 2023, the landmark was the Assisted Decision Act, and that really brought forward a lot of conversations, because I suppose, you know, as Carmel mentioned, the Ward of Court situation that she was in, like the Assisted Decision Making Act now has mechanisms in place so that it doesn't get to that point. So like that we look at individuals from the perspective of their capacity, and we will always presume that they have full capacity unless otherwise indicated. And that takes away, I suppose, the paternalistic approach to caring for our elders or caring for people with dementia, because often what they see as the best approach might necessarily be the best in the best interest of that person. So I think really, you know, having the in the moment autonomy can support the person, but also can support that care network around them as well. And doing those functional assessments is not easy. A lot of the time, you know, if you can do them as performance-based is really helpful, because, you know, it can truly then tell where the person needs to have the supports, and whether it is with an executive planning or activity as part of life, or whether it is as part of a memory issue that the person might be having at that time. So I suppose it's looking at the support mechanisms that are there to support people with the palliative care approach to dementia. And we're very fortunate in 2018, 2022, we had a funded study from a European body across 6 countries, and we looked at the Comfort Care booklet. And the Comfort Care booklet is a booklet mainly within nursing homes, and it just guides the person and their family through, you know, decisions around comfort, like hydration, pain, where they would like to die, you know, end of life conversations, spiritual nature as well is considered within it. And this booklet was adapted, well, it was originally developed in Canada under Marcel Arcan, and he was a physician in cancer, but he saw other opportunities for this booklet across other conditions. So when we developed the Irish version of it, we had a consultant geriatrician involved, we had palliative care consultants, we had people with dementia and carers, like Carmel was involved with the iterations of it. And that really can be given to anybody to help think about, well, what are some care decisions that we might need to think about in, you know, a couple of months down the road, or a couple of weeks down the road, or even maybe in, you know, hours down the road. So I think, though, that this is one kind of, you know, light touch. We like to say, you know, we want to have high touch and low tech as part of, you know, the comfort care measures that we have with in care homes. But in the community, there's a lot more now because of the Assisted Decision Act from the perspective of advanced care planning tools. Like the Think Ahead one is widely available, and that again is good for when a person has capacity and is able to still inform the direction of those decisions. But I think it's having those ACP tools, or assisted tools, but also decision support tools that can really help the carer as they make decisions. Well, how long do we keep Sean at home, as Helen spoke about, and the challenge that had for them during lockdown in a rural part of Ireland. So I think having those tools and having access to them at the right time, you know, because a lot of the time you need to have this information in a timely manner when you're in that space. So being alerted to where you can get that information. So educating healthcare professionals and clinicians in memory clinics, in community hubs, in GP practices is really good to help, you know, support decision making, to, you know, for a palliative approach to care.
That's actually really interesting. And just to be clear, the Assisted Decision Making Act is an Irish
Yes.
legislation.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'll put up a link to that so people who are interested can maybe go and have a read of it afterwards.
Yeah, and it varies across the globe, really. Like the practices around, you know, dying vary, and it's great that we can learn from each other's as well across countries.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, what would you say you have learned from other countries?
There's no one country that's doing it right, you know. I can definitely say that it varies. And then when you look at the back end of some of the data, like a lot of these practices aren't taken up, you know, unless it's like a really terminal condition, you know, like that has really poor prognosis. You know, a lot of the time the opportunities and practices aren't taken up. And is that then because there is a lack of awareness, there's a fall off in communication, people are scared, you know, people are unsure in the moment. Yeah, so you know, there's you know, pros and cons with them, but we're still learning, we're still trying to navigate, well, how can that fit within the Irish practice, knowing that the resources that we have in current care contexts.
Well, switching it around though, rather than talking about, you know, in the third person, you know, what could be available, maybe Carmel or Helen would like to say something about how you'd like people to understand what it's like to live with dementia, like from your perspective.
Can I just go back to something? And again, Irene probably gave me the prompt. I've been very involved with the assisted decision-making process here. As a person with dementia, I was that voice. And one of the things that we've done through the years is to let people talk about and look at cases. And there was a wonderful case in England about living at home. And it's just to follow up about living at home as well, that people make decisions. We make decisions, you know, I've, you know, my power of attorney, I have my advanced care plan, but I can also change my mind about anything that's on that right until the end, because the research tells us that we still have the capacity to the end, whether it's the blink of an eye or a nod of our head or whatever. So I think that's important. The other thing that's important is about safeguarding us. And it's a huge issue around decision making. the assisted decision making is about safeguarding us. Do you know what? I chose to live at home. If I die on the floor in this house, that is fine. That is my choice, and that choice should not be taken away from me. So when we talk about decision making, about staying at home, our capacity should be respected, and my wish is to change. If I change my mind about it and say, oh God, yeah, keep me alive, then I have that right to do that. And that really matters to people with dementia. And people with dementia, we live in fear because of what is going to happen to us, because of all the research, of all the work that was done out there. And now, thankfully, there's positive research done by Irene and Carmel and others, that can help our process. But I just want to be clear, there's a huge fear for people with dementia. There's a huge fear of the unknown, of who's going to decide. People are going to decide. They're going to take. So the assisted decision, take our rights away. So the assisted decision making is really, really important here, because we encourage everybody with dementia, as advocates, everybody with dementia, to have a plan in place as to what they want, and to have a power of attorney, our decision maker, assisted decision maker, because those things are going to give us the quality of life that we really need, that we will not die worrying about whether we are going to be put in a home, or whether all the rights that we said we wanted during our life, to live at home until we die at home, that those things are for us, and those are our decisions, and they should be respected with dignity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carmel, you want to add anything to that?
No, I suppose, yeah, the assisted decision making is really important, and because I had to make my mom a ward of court because, well, first of all, the bank manager took it upon himself to deny her access to her bank account in a small, because we live in a small village, and her diagnosis went viral, even though it was the wrong. But the other thing was that everybody considered, if you were given a diagnosis of dementia, that it was all about Alzheimer's and memory. And Mom didn't. She had vascular and frontotemporal, which I may say that when we got the diagnosis, I hadn't a clue. I'd never heard of dementia. But yet we walked out of the consultant's office delighted with ourselves because we had a name. But no signposting to supports or what it meant, nothing. So we just went off home muddled as usual. And then it was a constant battle for the 3 years for supports and information. And it was just, you'd get buckets of information from an organization, but that's not what you wanted. You just want it specific to your own experience and where you needed to go. And I suppose the other thing was that everything is centered around daycare. But if you're living out in rural Ireland, you're not near a daycare center. Transport is a big issue. And if you're talking about people that have worked and lived on the land all their lives, they do not want to go into a town or city to a day center to play bingo or whatever. And yes, there is a place for that, but you have to give people, again, choice. And I think Helen will talk to you about getting the support to live at home, daycare at home. And our other issue in Ireland is we have a statutory right to go into a care home, a nursing home, to be cared for, but we don't have the statutory right to remain in our own homes and get the care brought in. So we're advocating for that change as well, which would probably be much more cost effective for the government, because many people are still very independent, and it's actually family who pressure them to put them into a care home so that they don't have to feel guilty anymore or make an effort to go and visit, because so many go into a care home and nobody visits them, whether that be or in hospital. The other thing is being sent to hospital when there's no need. I'm advocating for more primary care centres, and that people, especially with dementia, are not sent to hospital when there's no need. So yeah, and I'd say it is slowly changing, but we have to open up the conversation and just talk about what are the options and give people choice.
Maybe just following on from that, you've been very clear about it should be about autonomy and personal choice and your rights, which I would agree with. But how do you think then, as a society, we can balance up that individual right with clear ethical concerns, perhaps some legal safeguards that might have to come with that? And how do you balance the autonomy with the safeguards in kind of deciding your own end of life decisions?
I've just found when I met Jules Breeze, and I had the pleasure of meeting her last year twice. They're from Canada, and herself and her husband Wayne fought for dementia to be included in assisted dying in Canada. So to listen to her story, and first of all, I had to ask her, once Wayne made the decision that he's going to go on such a date, I thought, was that your whole life then, every day thinking, oh, it's a day closer, and because he had to do it while he's still at full capacity, or what the medical team decided was full capacity? And she said no, that they lived their lives to the full because he was content. He knew he was in control. And I think that's here. I suppose it has to be while people have full capacity. And I think the law will be in place, and the safeguarding that families cannot make that decision. And that, I mean, is just obvious. Because there are, of course, families who would happily make that decision for their loved one. So I think I have no fear of, I think with the law being, it will be implemented and it will be correctly. I don't believe for a minute that people will be euthanized without their decision and their choice. I don't know. I do find I'm finding it difficult to decide that you have to go when you still have capacity. But I suppose that gives you the right to right up to the day and the minute you can change your mind. And you build up a relationship, obviously, with the team, the maid. So I think we just have to educate ourselves around it and have the safeguards put in place.
A tough call, though, I think. Irene, I don't know. What's your
Yeah, and I suppose that word safeguard is probably one that's used a lot in the clinical arena or in, say, care homes. And security is another thing that's really important for the person with dementia, and feeling secure. So they might feel safe, but they mightn't feel secure in their home, and it's for them to be able to communicate that. And it's how they're made feel within the environment that they're in. And remember, that environment could be anywhere. It could be in the home, it could be in a care home, it could be temporary respite, but yet they might need to go into respite to give their family a break, and it's how they're made feel within the context that they're in. So I suppose there's a lot when we talk about safeguarding about coercion and coercive practices. And these are like subtle behaviors of where someone can be controlled or where there can be conflict. And basically, the person is made feel, not secure or miserable in themselves in their day to day. And, that could be from any number of people around them as well. So it's how do we identify that, and how can we support them in moving through that later part of life to have conversations around end of life, because there is no wonder drug that's going to reverse aging, reverse any of these, ailments that will come upon a lot of people as they move into that later stage. But in particular with dementia, the figures are there, the projections are there, they are quite scary. But I think even start by talking about, well, what matters most to the person right here and right now, and then being able to move that conversation into, you know, year on, year on, to be able to see, well, you know, the person, mom, dad, my best friend, is still, you know, advocating for, you know, what matters to them is that they will still die at home, or that they will still die without suffering and prolonged pain. So I think just even coming back to that, to kind of help have conversations. You know, we see a lot happening around, you know, death cafes. Like, I've never been to one, but I'm actually intrigued to see, you know, what some of these conversations could be about. And I know Carmel and a group have submitted an abstract for the Alzheimer's Europe conference as well. And Helen, around like considering conversations around death, because it is still very much a taboo. You know, people don't want to talk about it, even though, as was said earlier, like it's something that's definite for us all in life, but we don't know when that might be. So, you know, I think about really, you know, as well as talking about it is, you know, because as Carmel said, it's 7% of verbal communication. Observing how the person is. Are they cooped up in the corner in their own little shell, you know, or are they engaged in the activity in the room at that moment? Are they stimulated by what's around them, whether it's the dog, or whether it's, you know, the outdoor environment, or whether it's children playing or other people within the activity? Like, how are they, you know, stimulated within that environment? Because they're the things that bring meaning, you know, in every day as well.
I couldn't agree more. Death has been so sanitized now. It's just not talked about. It's removed to another place, which makes it really difficult for a lot of people to have any conversations about death, sadly. But I suppose, like, I can see time's pushing on. My last question, I guess, then would be to all of you: what does dying with dignity mean to you personally? Just throw that light one in at the end.
And I suppose, you know, it's probably, you know, more relevant when you're, you know, closer to having that more informed piece. I would still consider myself quite young, and I mightn't be at that point yet, and that if anything is going to happen to me in the next while, that it would be, you know, some life-saving measures, so that my family could, I could torment my family for another while. But you know, on a more serious note, I think just to be you know, so it's peaceful, you know, so that those around me aren't left traumatized afterwards, and that I am at peace. Yeah, I think for me, because of the context I am at the moment, I think I just would want it to be peaceful for everybody, and not have, you know, repercussions afterwards, because that is something that can happen a lot of the time with families as well, is that there can be conflict afterwards, and then that can, you know, remove quality in their lives thereafter. So over to Helen or Karma.
No, I was going to add, because what I've kind of noticed as well, if I have these conversations, people kind of back off when they find out the job that I do, and they're like, okay, that's interesting. But then if you kind of dig in with them, it's just because it's not part of their fabric of life. They don't think about it. If you ask them, do you have a will? Most people don't have a will, which is crazy, really. And thinking of dying just doesn't exist. You know, it's not part of modern thinking, unfortunately. But anyway, sorry, Irene, I didn't mean to throw that one at you particularly. I'm sure you have
No, it's okay.
lots of years ahead of you. Equally, Helen and Carmel, I think you've got lots of years ahead of you. But again, just hypothetically, what does it look like to you?
Leaving this world peacefully.
Yeah.
And there's no more tears. There's no more worrying for our families and people with dementia. I just want to say that again. It's very difficult, but for people with dementia, but to have their choices and their voices remembered and upheld. And I just want to finish in a very witty Irish story. A few weeks ago, it was my birthday, and my nieces decided that they were going to come to visit me. Well, they came, my car was here, and sadly my door was open. Okay, and the dog was here. So there was no sign of me. So one of my nieces arrived and she said, I'm here. There's no sign of her. And that was Orla. And she rang Helen, and Helen said, well, did you check the bedroom? And she said, oh God, she could be dead. And then my other niece arrived. And then I was with another niece who was visiting from Canada. And when I came home and said, oh God, we thought you were dead. And I said to them, well, you know the story. You all know what I want. So they said, oh, well, at least we didn't have to make any decisions, you know, that you were that sick and that you couldn't make your decision in the end. So it's about making our decisions and about how we die happily. But I just thought it was a typical story as to around how we die and how people look at, you know, they immediately thought, oh, there's no decisions to be made here. So it's about, I know it's a very old Irish saying, we use it a lot. It's peaceful death. That's all I wish for.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Peaceful death. That's what we all want. Absolutely. But Carmel, what about your your vision?
Well, I suppose I thought I hope I'm not going to go any day soon. I have a lot of tormenting to do yet, but
a lot of traveling assistance to do.
Yeah, and there are times when I'm exhausted and I can see how people give up and they think, oh God, I've had enough, and they want to go. So imagine if you were really, really ill. But yeah, as long as I can go with my friends near me, where not in a hospital or a nursing home. I want to be in my own little space. And I always say that afterwards, I want to party. I don't want this morgue business. I want to celebrate life, and I want everyone to have fun, which we do very well in Ireland in the funeral, but we start off very somber and then we rev up.
Being Scottish, I know exactly what you mean.
A party is important, Carmel.
Exactly.
But I think we're going to have to start maybe talking about it from a younger age, you know, and that it's part of life, and just get on with it. You know, you're coming into the world, but you're also guaranteed to go. And that's kind of it. So when death affects you, I think you start thinking then of your own life and what you've given, I think, as well, and not everybody obviously thinks about what they've contributed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your very honest answers as well. I really appreciate it. Well, we've actually used up all the time we have today, so for my part, it's been really interesting. Thank you. Three ladies full of life, and with lots of years ahead. So Helen, Carmel, Irene, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, ladies. Very stimulating.
Yeah, thanks for starting the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.